Hi, my name is Joshua Schneider, and we're here to discuss the 83rd Perek of Tehillim, Pei Gimel. I came to know the Mrs. Dratch through Rabbi Dratch's Rip from the Headlines weekly shir on Shabbos, and I used to come myself. I was a regular attendee, and I used to come with my son, who's a bit of a character, and would always take the New York Times and ask for his own individual can of Diet Coke and leave before the shir or go off someplace during the shir to read the paper and have his Diet Coke. And Mrs. Dratch always treated him well and treated me and my family well. So that's how I came to know the Dratches. So let us start with our discussion of the 83rd Perek of Tehillim. So the 83rd Perek of Tehillim is the concluding, or this concludes the series of compositions attributed to Asaf. The Mizmor starts Shir Mizmor Asaf. We know there was a set of about 10 compositions to this point that were attributed to Asaf. The preceding psalm, Psalm 82, recounts the successes of the Melech Yehoshaphat as relayed in Divrei Hayamim Beis, in Chronicles 2, in chapter 19, his reestablishment and his success in reestablishment of the judiciary in Israel. And our Perek, and our psalm, continues with what is mentioned there in the 20th Perek in Chronicles 2, in Divrei Hayamim, the wars that have been waged against the Melech Yehoshaphat by Ammon, Moab, Aram, and Seir. Essentially, our psalm is a prayer to God to help us defeat our enemies. And essentially, it is broken down into two parts. Part one is the plotting of our enemies against us to destroy us. And then part two, a prayer for the downfall of our enemies. The first part opens, just in more detail, the first part of the first half opens with the opening, Shir Mizmor Asaf, which we'll get back to, and then a prayer, a cry to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, to save us, to help us in this time, and that's Pasuk Beis. And then Pasuk Gimel through Tes, the 3rd verse through the 9th verse, discusses and enumerates the plotting of our enemies against us, and including the names of the enemies that are seeking to destroy us. Part 2 of the psalm goes from the 10th verse to the 19th verse to the end. It's broken down roughly as a prayer for the downfalls of our enemies, as in the days of Yehoshaphat, as we defeated them then. The downfall of our enemies by wind and fire, more particulars of their downfall. And then finally, the defeat of our enemies and the proclamation of God, Master of the universe. God is the Master of the universe. So I think, and I encourage you all to go ahead and pick up a Tehillim and read this psalm after this. But when you read through the psalm and you listen to the psalm, it's very relevant in the sense you'll see a lot of current events in the psalm. It talks about just as then they struggled, the nation of Israel struggled for their independence and their legitimacy, so too today we struggle for our independence, continue to struggle for our independence and legitimacy in the nations of the world. And the Mizmor and the Psalm reflects that, and we should draw inspiration from that. So with that, let us continue. The first pasuk, Shir Mizmor Asaf, a song with musical accompaniment by Asaf. Really, if you might have been learning along, we don't exactly know how they recited the Tehillim in the ancient times. We're not experts in the difference between a shir, a song, or a mizmor, or musical accompaniment. We see these terms sometimes in different sequence. We see shir, we see shir mizmor, mizmor shir. But even though we don't know exactly, the Baal HaTanya, the founding Lubavitch Rebbe, points out on this pasuk as to why is it the sequence the way it is. So shir is translated into lyrics, mizmor, aklizemer, musical instruments. And as we mentioned, our psalm is mirrored or parallels the events in Divrei HaYamim in Chronicles 2, in the 19th chapter and the 20th chapter, where we're waging war against our enemies. And there, God's charge to the Bnei Yisrael, to the nation of Israel, is that your role in this war that we are going to be waging is only to go and pray, to Bikol Gadol Lamala, with a loud voice to the heavens. So the essence or the focus of their role there, of Bnei Yisrael's role there, are the words, to say the words and pray to God. So therefore, here we say Shir Mizmor LaAsaf. It's a song with musical accompaniment to Asaf. The next pasuk continues, Al Elohim, Al Damilach, Al Techarash, Al Tekshot El. O God, do not hold yourself silent, do not be deaf, and do not be still, O God. Really, it's repetitious in the sense of, you'll find this often for emphasis, repetition in the way that we're asking God, making sure that He is not silent. Again, Al Damilach, do not be silent. Al Techarash, do not be mute. Do not be deaf. Al Teshot, and do not be still. Take some action and help us. Now, the next pasuk, Ki hinei oivecha yehamnu msa'anecha na'asu rosh. O God, do not hold yourself silent. That was second verse. Do not hold yourself silent. Do not be deaf. Do not be still. For behold, your foes are in an uproar. The Yehamnun, the word Yehamnun, in an uproar. There is a disagreement as to what exactly is the shoresh of that word. What is the root word of that word? The Radak renders the word shoresh of hama from the word a noise, an uproar. Hey, mem, hey. While the Eben Ezra renders it from the word hamon, from the multitudes, like hamon am. The multitudes gather together and they make noise and cause an uproar. And then we go on against in Pasuk Dalet and Hey, against your nation they plot deviously. They take counsel against those who come, those who you protect. They say, come, let us cut them off from nationhood, so Israel's name will be remembered no more. Again, in that pasuk, Amru lahu v'nechadem v'goy v'lo yizacher shem Yisrael. Od. Ki na'atzu leiv yachdav alecha bris yecherosu. For they take counsel together unanimously against you, they strike a covenant. It's interesting, like I made mention, that it's like the current events. These are nations that may have were pitted in war against each other, but they came together unanimously against the nation of Israel. They put aside their differences with one common goal, to defeat the nation of Israel. And really what their true goal is to attempt to defeat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Rashi points out here. And in ancient times this was very common, that a nation, when it defeated another nation, would proclaim that it defeated the nation's other god. As Chazal mentioned in regard to Titus, when he defeated the Bnei Yisrael, he claimed that he killed God. So we see the same with the nations of the world here. So we can go on to enumerate particular nations and waging different battles against the nations of the world, against us. The next pasuk, Ahalei Edom v'Yishmaelim, Moab v'Hagarim, the tents of Edom and Ishmaelites, of Moab and Hagarites. It's interesting to note, and the next pasuk goes on to name other nations waging wars against us. It's interesting to note that only in regard to the Ahalei Edom v'Yishmaelim, only in those nations it makes mention of the tents. And the reason being, some Mefarshim, some of the commentators explain, is because these nations came prepared. They were in it for the long haul. This was premeditated. It was not something where they were to protect themselves, but they came prepared with provisions for the long haul to attempt to defeat the Bnei Yisrael, to defeat the nations of Israel. The next pasuk, next few psukim, do to them as 10, do to them as Midian and to Sisera and to other nations of the world. We list the enemies of old and different battles that we wage when we were involved with them. Pasuk 13, the 13th, who said, we shall conquer for ourselves the pleasant habitations of God. O my God, make them like whirling chaff, like stubble before the wind. And so on and so forth. And again, like I said, try to go ahead and read the Mizmor as the nations of the world plotting against us as in those days. And the Mizmor continues, that is our hope, that we defeat them just as we defeated them in those days. And the Mizmor continues and concludes, V'yedu ki ata shimcha Hashem levadecha elyon hakol ha'aretz. Then we will know that you, whose name is Hashem, are alone, most high, all over the earth. That is our hope, that God defeats them and that His name is known to all the nations of the world. Bringing back to the relevancy of today, it should not be a surprise, but again, just bringing it to the relevancy, this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch that some communities have the custom to read this Mizmor on the holiday of Purim. Obviously, it's about the struggles of our nation for independence and survival against the nations of the world. And even into the modern day, this is the Mizmor that the Jewish soldiers recite when they move to battle, a prayer to God to help us defeat our enemies as He did in the days of old. And so too, when we look for inspiration in events in the world, this is the Mizmor we should be looking to recite, and inspiration and guidance about those trials and tribulations and in those struggles. I thank you for listening and joining with me. Hopefully these words of Torah will be for a merit for the neshama of Sarivka Bas Harav Nachum and Mindel, the Sarah Lamb Drach. And thank you again for attending and listening, and may you continue on to the end of the Sefer of Tehillim.